The West Coast Express, obviously people in Western Canada and Vancouver and obviously in Calgary because they had to deal with it on a steady basis. But I guess tell us about how you came to that decision. And that's the topic that I want to sink my teeth into, as you said, the West Coast Express. And then how receptive were those guys at the idea of doing something long form with you, of all people?
Exactly. With me of all people, I think is where it starts. Yeah, it's just a great story to begin with. And you guys have been around this long enough to know one when you see one. And this is a great story. Just on the surface, three players from different organizations acquired by three different GMs who wind up in the same place and somehow become arguably the NHL's best line for a short period of time. That doesn't happen. If you have one player like the guy Markus Naslund became or the guy Todd Bertuzzi became, you don't let those guys go. So that's just on the surface. But there's so much more to the story, being the team that really pulled the Canucks out of the ditch. People weren't going to games in the late 90s. There was chaos in the organization, and this was the face of the franchise that pulled them out of that. And they were a fun team to watch. It's so easy now because the hockey's so entertaining and we see goals all the time. We see comebacks. It's so easy to forget that dead puck era, how boring most of the hockey was. But this was one of the few teams that wasn't. This was a team that played exciting hockey. They played it on a nightly basis. Yeah, it was flawed sometimes, but it was fun. And it was during an era that wasn't very fun. So that's the great story part of it. And as you guys know, there's some unforgettable moments for this line and in this story, whether they're playoff defeats at the hands of like the Calgary Flames in 2004 or the Minnesota Wild or the Detroit Red Wings. Like you can run down the list. A lot of teams lose in the playoffs, but not all of them lose in the way that this team found a way to lose. So there's that part of it. And then getting those guys on board wasn't as hard as I thought. I kind of wondered at the beginning, will they want to do this? Do they want to revisit the history? And I called Markus and he was happy to do a long interview. And because of that, I called Todd and said, well, I talked to Markus. Would you be okay with it? And he was happy to do it. And Brendan, as you guys know, is the easiest guy. Yeah, sure. He's so easygoing. I knew Brendan was going to be in. And then once that happened, Berkey was in. Mark Crawford, Ed Jovanovski, the Sedins, everybody was happy to have a conversation.
How did that all start to work? Was it kind of an instant thing for those three guys, or did it take a little bit of time for that West Coast Express to become a thing?
It took quite a while. Markus Naslund came in from Pittsburgh, as you mentioned. Great deal, arguably the best in the history of the Vancouver Canucks for Alex Stoyanov. And he was coming off a Penguins team that had Lemieux and Yager, and it should work there for a skilled player, but it hadn't. He came in, and it wasn't instant for Markus Naslund either. He wasn't sure where he fit in the Canucks organization, and at one point almost asked out. Like almost asked out, and Berkey stopped him and said, don't say what I think you're going to say, because if you ask to be traded, I'm going to trade you. So don't say it. We're going to keep you for a while and get back out there and get to work, is the Cole's notes on that. Berkey tells it a lot better than I do. Then Todd Bertuzzi comes in. It's the Trevor Linden deal. Like big pressure for him coming in, but he was just so relieved to be in a different place where they weren't expecting him to be Clark Gillies. Like that's who they thought he was going to be. Mike Milbury wanted him to be Clark Gillies and run roughshod over people all the time. And he wanted to be more of a skill guy and use his size when he chose to use it. And so he comes in, he starts playing on a line with Messier. It's going pretty well, but then he gets a couple of injuries. And by the time he kind of gets back and gets going, well, Messier's on his way out. He's figuring things out. They get a little chemistry with Naslund. They're playing with another former Flame when they bring him in, Andrew Castles. So they bring Castles in, underrated centerman for sure. They've got great chemistry. But all of a sudden, Mark Crawford decides to put Brendan Morrison in there in his second season with the Canucks. And it was basically just to give the line a different look. And what they found is it had more speed all of a sudden. Castles was very good, but he wasn't fleet of foot. Awesome passer, but Brendan could get back, do the defensive work, and he could get up in the rush. And so that unlocked the rush game of the West Coast Express. They could create more skating than they could have, more of that half-court offense, if you will, with Andrew Castles.
So how long or how much content is there? How much for listeners to consume, and how long did it take you to put it together, to build this thing? And then what's the editing process like? Because I know that's always hard. What belongs, what doesn't belong, and what's too much? That's got to be a bit of a challenge. Had to have been a challenge for you.
Yeah, and it's not completed yet. I'm still in the midst of completing the last couple of episodes, so it remains a challenge, Boom. But it took a long time. It took me the better part of a year to compile all the interviews because I had other gigs going on at the time, tried different podcasts, tried teaching as well. And so I've been kind of doing this on the side and figuring it was going to come to a point where I could put it all together. So the hardest part is sifting through it and going, I don't know if we can use that. It's really good, but I don't know if it fits with the story. And hey, this is my first time doing it. Hopefully I'm getting it right. There's a couple of episodes out there right now. They dropped yesterday. It's available on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you find your podcast, or you can go to unrealsports.com. That's Unreal with 2 E's. Morrison will like that because he's a fishing guy. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. There's going to be 9 episodes total, and this is going to go for a while. It's probably going to end up being a total of, I don't know, 6-7 hours of listening content.
And you said what, every Friday
That's
you're
awesome.
dropping a new one? That's kind of the plan. 2 out already. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 out already. Want to give people a few days to consume them. As you guys know, not everybody jumps on it right away. People maybe need the weekend or they don't hear about it right away. So I want to give people an opportunity to consume the first couple of episodes before we release the next one on February 10th and then every Friday after that.